Welcome back, Psych 100 students. This is Chapter 6, Volume 3, finishing up on learning, and we're going to do the review for the exam. So, we were talking about the bad boy of psychology, J.B. Watson, and if you noticed, in this particular article, where he was voted most handsomest professor at Johns Hopkins, there's a note as far as the title of the article, and it says, Notes on a Scandal. How a racy rumor about the father of behaviorism made its way into 200 psychology textbooks. And that leads us to the other reason why he is nicknamed the bad boy of psychology. Not only was he mistreating his human subject, little Albert, but as a married man, he was having an affair with his student assistant, Rosalie Rayner. This ultimately ended in his divorce, getting fired from the university, and despite being the father of behaviorism and former president of the American Psychological Association, he was kicked out of the field of psychology, which forced him to do other things, get into advertising. Now you may ask yourself, what does conditioning have to do with advertising? And of course your answer is everything. This notion of pairing things away together. Who can love a girl or a fellow with smoke-stained teeth? Well, we could if they used the product Pepco. Or, oh dear, I wish my baby wouldn't cry so much. Why is the baby crying? Because that baby doesn't use Johnson's baby powder. So we see this today constantly in this notion, if we have this particular product, we will have all these friends or these characteristics. Classical conditioning. Thank you, J.B. Watson. What ultimately happened to Watson? Well, he started off growing up in the South with an alcoholic father, so he had a chip on his shoulder. Most people would classify him as an out-and-out racist. He goes into disgrace because of his behavior with the Little Albert experiment, and then becomes quite successful in advertising. But over time, he became like an alcoholic like his father before him. He did receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from APA, but he refused to go pick it up, and he sent his grown son to pick it up in his stead. His wife, Rosalie Rayner, died rather young, and he became old and bitter and angry. What happened to little Albert? Well, there's some evidence that says that this man is actually little Albert, or was little Albert. His name was William Albert Barger, died in 2007 at age 87, and he seemed to live a pretty normal life, except for he did dislike animals, including dogs, which was presented to him by J.B. Watson. That's certainly no evidence, since we know about extinction. Some people believe that your professor might in fact be little Albert. Contrary to those beliefs, despite this photographic evidence, not true. A little bit before my time. Now, let's switch our attention to Boris Frederick Skinner, who I had an opportunity to meet. And let me just say, meeting Skinner was like meeting a rock star or a movie star. I didn't really have anything substantial to say to him. I wish I had known more about his life so I could communicate on a higher level with him. When you meet somebody famous, you have certain impressions of them, and he met all my impressions. He was very intellectual, very articulate, very behavioral. So what did he come up with? He came up with this concept called operant conditioning. And here you see the so-called Skinner box, even though he didn't like calling it that. We got a rat pushing a lever. The rat, if it pushes the lever in the proper sequence of lights, will get a reward. If it doesn't, it gets a punishment. Guess what? Most of our moms and dads were into operant conditioning. They may not have read the research of B.F. Skinner, but boy, did they recognize this idea that rewards and punishments are what it's all about, right? If you want to increase somebody to do something more often, give them a reward. If you want to decrease what they're doing, give them a punishment. So Skinner, who grew up in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania on a small farm, actually had a younger brother who was more popular, but his brother passed away rather young. And so young B.F. Skinner had a lot of attention put on him. He decided to want to be a writer. That dream didn't quite work out the way he thought it would work out, but he did become a writer, but more in the field of behaviorism. As a kid, he liked to keep small pets and build things with his hands. As a student and as a professor, starting off at a junior college and working his way up to Harvard, he did the same thing. He worked with rats and pigeons. He got them to do all kinds of incredible things through rewards and punishment. As a matter of fact, he actually worked with the U.S. military and was actually awarded some money to test this out, with his idea that pigeons could ride inside missiles and peck towards the target that you would like to bomb. Ultimately, the Army decided not to go with that project. So if you recall, when we talked about the brain and the size of pigeon brains, not a good idea. So this notion of operant conditioning is this idea that the environment operates on us, right? It molds and shapes us in every way, form, and fashion. So as you were raising your hand in class, I asked a question, that's been reinforced in you as to what students do. If you picked up your phone and started texting one of your friends during class and then lost a bunch of points for doing so, you probably wouldn't do that ever again. That's operant conditioning. Take a look at this little girl. She doesn't have any money, but she approaches a candy machine and pushes the button, and she gets lucky. There's a malfunction, somebody put some money previously, she gets a candy bar. According to operant conditioning, because she got rewarded this one time, she's more likely to do that same behavior again and again. Now, she may not get rewarded every time, but according to Skinner, it doesn't matter. He says, if you don't believe me, go to Vegas or Atlantic City and watch people playing the slot machines over and over again. They don't win every time, but they'll continue to play. Just getting rewarded once in a while is fine. Moving on, this man right here, who died in the early 2000s. John Garcia, a Mexican-American psychologist, who at the age of 40 decided, I think I'll go to college and get myself a degree. He's a good example of how there shouldn't be an age limit as to when we say, I'm too old for this, I'm too old for that. I might have told people just last week, I'm too old to do YouTube videos. I've never done one before. Yet here I am. So anybody can do anything if they set their mind to it. John Garcia, of course, worked on this notion of conditioning, and he taught ranchers how to condition coyotes to not want to eat meat, specifically their sheep. Then we have this gentleman, Albert Bandura, who I like to think of as monkey see, monkey do. We look at his classic experiment where a woman is watched on video and she's grabbing a Bobo doll, hitting it with a toy hammer, and of course kicking it. The kids who watch this video go into a room full of toys and they repeat the exact same process. Monkey see, monkey do. Here's an actual photograph I took of one of the actual Bobo dolls that were used. And of course, clowns have a bad name these days, sadly. Sorry, Ronald. This notion of modeling, right, is pretty prevalent in what we do. When we start a new job, we model the person who knows how to do the work so that we'll learn. I was fortunately showed by one of my distinguished colleagues how to do a video, how to set it up, how to load it on. Thank you very much. I modeled what she did, and so now I'm doing it. Probably not as good as she would have done, but I'm trying. We see modeling right from the get-go. And of course, we generally model those who we admire. That's why it always makes me laugh when I see famous movie stars or athletes saying, I'm no role model. And yet, they are. If they're exposed to the public, of course they are. Animals will even model what we do. So they learn from us, and we learn from them. If you've been in any kind of classroom setting, you'll notice that that's how we learn. Monkey see, monkey do. Now, some of the controversy has been for modeling as well. Kids that play these violent games are more likely to grow up and become violent themselves. And the research is mixed on that. Sure, some people copy what they see, right? You watch a movie, you like the music, you come out singing the songs, you're that person for a while. That happens. But will that translate to you becoming that person? Some cases, no relation, no correlation whatsoever between what we see and what we do, right? Now, for the answers. For Chapter 5, one of these questions you've already been exposed to. You either talked about the Sanchez or you talked about the Lee family. So you're going to describe that case study in detail, define and relate the concept. Now, the new question is to differentiate between sensation and perception. Now, for this one, I want you to go back to your notes from class and describe 3 visuals I showed you. And if you recall, I showed you some really weird stuff during this chapter. Discuss those concepts and those visuals and to describe them as to what concepts they were exhibiting. An example of that would be the Mueller-Lyer illusion. Okay? For Chapter 6, I'm going to have 2 questions from that. And of course, I want you to speak about Ivan Pavlov, a little bit about his background, his experiment, and his concept of classical conditioning. And I'm going to have you talk about B.F. Skinner, a little bit about his background, his experiments, and his concept, operant conditioning. Eventually, I'll send you all the questions, and of course, I'll do reviews after each chapter. And when I send you the exam, I'm going to expect for you to answer each question thoroughly. They're going to be worth 5 points each. It'll be 10 questions in total. I'll give you plenty of time to do the exam, so it won't be this time structure thing. You'll have several days to do it, or some definitely an extended time period. I haven't figured out exactly how long it'll be. And then you'll send it back to me, and then I'll grade it, and then submit your grades back to you. Keep in mind that the chapter notes are going to be due at the very beginning of the first class of the week. So it's just like you're coming in, but you're going to be submitting the chapter notes electronically. If that doesn't work for you, there's no way for you to do it, then talk to me and we'll figure out a way. Maybe you can do a drive-by and you can just throw it out your window and I'll be standing outside in campus and you can hand it to me, a physical copy. But most of you have figured out how to send things electronically, either as an attachment or as a photograph. I've already started getting some things submitted. Keep in mind, no penalty whatsoever for submitting things early. So if you want to get ahead and submit other chapters in advance, you're more than welcome to do that. Again, thank you for your patience. We're doing the best we can to accommodate everybody, and I hope and wish that you remain healthy and happy. And don't forget to stop and smell the churros.